Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 55th episode of the Manor Podcast. I'm your co-host, Roger Bodee, joined as always with my best friend and other co-host, Michael Hamilton. Michael, I'm now qualified for Nationals, and we get to play in Nationals together. Are you excited?
Yeah, we get to go play the new CC format. We get to go draft some Monarch. I know you're ecstatic about drafting, but I am excited. And I don't think Vegas is my favorite city to go to, but at least I'll see a lot of cool people and have a good time playing Flesh and Blood. So,
Hear
how
me
about
out.
you?
Hear me out. Let's go for the whole month of August then. We'll go early, and we'll compete in Evo in the new Street Fighter 6. We'll just register. We got a whole 2 months to train up for Evo. If you can even open under like general things, but I think you can, but probably not. But I think you have to be invited. But in case you can, we'll go early, and you can become the Street Fighter world champion. Does that sound good?
If I'm going to become a Street Fighter World Champion, it's going to take a lot more than 2 months. I am at the bottom of bronze. I'm trying my best using these modern controls, doing some punches. Still can't get my Shoryuken inputs correct, but I'm having a good time. It's lots of fun. But
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to be playing it competitively, or at least I shouldn't say not playing it competitively, because that's like I am playing it as a casual competitive person. Yeah, yeah, but I do not expect to be competing at any high levels of that game anytime soon, if ever. But I'm having a good time. And that's what matters.
I'm glad you're enjoying it. I've liked Street Fighter for a long time, so I'm happy to share the Street Fighter love. And I'm playing on regular boomer controls on my regular boomer Ryu, just like I said I would, and get to do the cross-ups and the Shoryukens and the Hadoukens, and I'm just right at home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was always more of a Smash guy, but someday we'll get a new Smash, maybe.
I'm just not good at. I've never been good at Super Smash Brothers. Like, I don't know what it is about that game. I don't know if it's just like too frantic. I guess like I think the floatiness of the characters and the aerials being so important just like add another dimension to the game. Because like Street Fighter, it's just like very like compacted. It's a 2D, very tight focused input based game, whereas Smash Brothers, obviously the inputs don't matter. Your character just does a thing with a button. I don't know. It's just never been something I've been particularly good at.
Just right? Like
so you just hit down B, up B, right B, left B.
Yeah. Your inputs still matter, and like you have like small windows for buffering things for like moves that follow up with other moves, but like it is definitely much easier to have your character do what you're trying to do in Smash Bros. Than it is in Street Fighter, which arguably a good thing, but anyway, Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, that other game that we care about, I guess. What were we talking about this week?
So we're not going. Oh, this week. We want to talk about the Living Legend system, how it's doing. Oldheim just hit Living Legend after Michael won the Pro Tour, and then Briar is maybe Living Legended. Hopefully people know by the time this podcast goes live, but currently we're like kind of up in the air. Is she at 998? Is she at 1,000? You had your tweet.
Is she at 99.99?
99 repeating, and I don't think that's a. I guess like that is basically 1,000, but math. But
yeah.
I don't think there's any ways to get fractions
I should have put
of
6969. I should have put 99.69 repeating, of course.
Nice.
I punted.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But I don't think there's any way to get fraction of points right now, although I still am not sold on the winner takes all kind of system it has right now.
Yeah, let's talk about that first. So do you think the Living Legend system as a whole for the progression of heroes moving into it is kind of like serving its function as a way to not balance out, because it's not supposed to be a balancing mechanic, but like reward the heroes that are performing well and move them towards this rotation out of classic constructed?
So yeah, I do prefer the Living Legend structure to just like having to constantly ban things to keep the old decks and the powerful decks in line with what is new and fresh. I think like I'd rather Chain, Starvo, Prism, just Living Legend go away, rather than us keep dealing with them and they keep nerfing cards. Then we see Prism for forever. We see Luminaris forever. We see Arclight Sentinel forever. I think it's good that like when heroes are like progressively like doing really well in the tournaments, really well in the metagame, that eventually they're just leaving. And I would say that it has kind of accomplished that goal. And I don't think that like the winner takes all. I guess like Lexi has less points than or got less points from the Pro Tour and the calling than I feel like she should have. But I think the it is working as intended.
That's fair. Yeah. I think just the little interactions that happened over the weekend where people were specifically scooping to Briar and playing Briar in the finals. And then, as opposed to like the results of flesh and blood matches determining who gets living legend points, it's kind of like people metagaming the system a little bit. And that just doesn't sit perfectly well with me. It's not like the worst thing in the world. It's not like I'm like the integrity of the game's ruined. I can't. It's just like it's just a small thing that I think could be improved. But overall, like you said at the Pro Tour, like Lexi was half of the top 8, and Lexi's did win the most living legend points out of any hero. For as much as people were complaining about Oldheim this whole time, or at people dislike Oldheim, I think Lexi had twice as many living legend points as Oldheim the last time I checked. I don't know what the next week's numbers were, but
From
that's
Road to
what it was
Nationals.
sitting at last week. Yeah. I think Oldheim was at like 50 or 60 and she was at like 110, 120 or something like that, somewhere in that ballpark. And ultimately, I just think there's going to be an issue if they don't start awarding points to top 8 heroes and kind of rotating out kind of like a core group of 20 to 25 heroes, I think is kind of their goal. Because otherwise, let's say they come out with a new wind ninja. So then you have a draconic ninja, a wind ninja, to keep in the format. And then let's say there's a third talented ninja. So basically, for each talent and class stratification that they do, if their commitment is to always keep a hero of those types available in classic instructed, eventually that's going to be untenable. So you're going to need more heroes to rotate out than what we're currently sitting at. And I also think that heroes should be rewarded based on their overall meta performance with living legend points, as opposed to just what happens in the result of 3 matches in a top 8, where I still think the majority, the lion's share of the points should go to the winning hero. But I think, top 8 should award at least a couple of points. Like, how is top 8ing a Pro Tour not equivalent to winning at least an RTN? Like, which one of those is more of a accomplishment of a living legend points? Like, that's not to knock anybody who plays Road to Nationals, but I mean, Pro Tours, Worlds, these high level events, they're the most difficult events in the world, and heroes that do well in those events kind of become legendary in their own right.
Yeah, and like I guess kind of going back, if you look at an event like the Calling Indianapolis, when there were 5 Oldheims in the top 8, Oldheim got 0 living legend points. And that one like really stuck out to me because like Oldheim was kind of like the talk of that tournament. There were 5 copies in the top 8, and it's a lot. And everyone was talking about the fatigue Oldheim being a real deck and stuff. And like the deck performed really well and didn't get any living legend points then. Just like Lexi didn't get any living legend points from Pro Tour weekend, despite being 4 of the top 8 of the Pro Tour. And I think it was less represented in the Calling top 8, but more than 0.
Yeah, Dave top 8 at the Calling, right?
Dave played Oldhim.
An Oldhim. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you're talking about Lexi then at that point?
Yeah, Lexi.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Lexi was more represented, and Lexi was more represented in the Pro Tour than the Calling, but there was still at least 1 Lexi in the top 8 of the Calling. I think maybe 2.
Yeah, and I don't think you have to offer the same amount of living legend points for top 8ing a Road to Nationals either, but just one, like a single point. And if you wanted to, like, you could even adjust the threshold slightly up to the overall system for how many points it takes to living legend. The point is that the system doesn't have to be static, and they've already changed the living legend system once, right? I remember that was like
Yeah,
right
so
after we first started.
originally heroes still needed 1,000 points. I think they've made two kind of big changes to it. So one of them is that heroes' weapons rotate with the heroes because, like, if Prism
Mhm.
rotates but the new Light Illusionist hero still gets Luminaris, it's the same hero. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, it's not exactly the same, but like
what's the difference?
Luminaris is like more Prism's identity than her hero power, I'm pretty sure. And then
Yeah, absolutely.
the other thing they changed was events used to give, like, I think Road to Nationals and ProQuest used to give like 8 or 6 points, and they cut it down to 2 because there's just so many more ProQuest and Road to Nationals now than there were when they first implemented the system, and that's like going to keep happening. Assuming the game grows, they'll have to keep reducing the numbers. So like,
Or raise the threshold. You can keep the
yeah,
current
or
heroes that are living legend in that old living legend bucket category, like whatever. You just call them like, what's the word I'm looking for? Grandfathered antique system living legend, and then just modernize every other hero's living legend system, after a certain point in time.
yeah, I think if they really just wanted to um, change it, they could just multiply all the points that everybody has, and by
That
the same
sounds
amount
like
that they're
so.
increasing the thing. Like if you make everyone have 5 times as many points they have, and you need 5,000 points instead of 1,000 points living legend, that wouldn't be like that hard to do. It's like a stock split, but for living legend points, a living legend split.
Sure. I guess that is reasonable. It just sounds weird to me, but I guess sounding weird and being weird aren't necessarily the same thing.
Mm-hmm. um, but yeah, at some point, if the game keeps growing, like, or next they can reduce Road to Nationals and ProQuest to being worth 1 for the winner, and then like you can't really go smaller than 1 unless you're introducing fractions of a points. And I guess that also could be
Then we
fine.
get to
You could do like,
99.999 points. We did it.
yeah, you could get like 0.5 for winning, and then like if you want to give points out to the top 8 or top 4 or something, um, without increasing the total amount of points given out, then you kind of either need to use fractions of points or just significantly increase how many points you need to living legend.
Mm-hmm. And
So
that being said, this year's also weird from like a living legend point standpoint, because there's just hundreds of less points now available over the course of this year because there's only one pro tour. And you know, if there was no second pro tour this year, then Briar would have 100 less living legend points. Like if there was only one pro tour a year, Pablo wins the first pro tour last year on Chain, there's no second pro tour, Briar's still sticking around for a whole nother year. So especially if they go back to 2, and maybe if Flesh and Blood gets big enough and they go to like a quarterly release schedule and kind of kick it all the way up to the cycle that Magic the Gathering was, with 3 pro tours and a Worlds, if they keep, or what else other people are really hoping for in the future, ourselves included, is more callings. That's going to also increase the amount of living legend points available to heroes. So the
unless
system
half of them are
obviously is
limited.
going to, yeah, the
Sorry.
system is there's no way it's going to be half of them limited, but anyways, the system is going to need to be updated at some point in time. So we just wanted to give our thoughts and opinions about where it currently stands and what our hopes for it going forward.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to continue talking about the splitting points for top 8? Because I do have a couple things that like
Go for
are
it,
kind
buddy.
of worse about it. I guess the biggest thing I'm thinking is they have that really nice article they post what each hero living legends, where it's like, here is what everyone did with this hero, and they got the names of all the ProQuest winners and all the bigger event winners, and it's like kind of cool to be like cemented in that hero's history. And it becomes a lot clunkier to do that if you have to include everyone that like top 8'd an RTN with the hero, because if you get like half a point for top 8ing an RTN or something. But I don't know, maybe that would be fine still.
Yeah,
It is kind of
I
cool.
don't think it would be, just adding a few more names to a list doesn't sound like that big of a deal to me. You don't have to.
Roughly 8 times as many names.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's going to be. I don't think names on a website is a reason to not change a system, I guess.
Fair, fair.
You said you had another point though. What else you got? What other points can I knock down?
Yeah, I forgot when you instantly refuted me what my other point was, and I didn't take a note or anything. So, that's. I guess I'm ready to move on.
Okay,
We'll come back to it.
sure. So even if Briar's not Living Legend, 4 heroes in the Living Legend format, potentially 5, do you think the format is good to go with the 4 or 5 heroes in it now? Do you think we could be playing the Living Legend format at Worlds, for example?
Um, so I think that the format, right, or with the heroes, including if Briar's in there, we're gonna have the classic triangle of Guardian versus Illusionist versus Runeblade, and I think it'll be a while before that changes though. So like holding off until we get a hero that's not one of those 3 classes, when those are the classes that have historically just been doing the best by far. I think it makes sense to just like start running the format. I know, oh gosh, I think it was James White that was talking about it. Someone from LSS was saying that like the plan was to start with it as like side events at tournaments, and then like it's not going to be like a calling right away. It's going to be like a side event, and then it'll grow if like there's demand for it, basically. And I think with 5 heroes in it, even though Oldhim might be kind of hard to play when Bravo's almost certainly better, almost strictly better, I would even say. But
Yeah, I don't know.
I do think that is enough.
Oldheim's basically banned for the foreseeable future until they give him like a broken Oldheim specialization or something of that nature, or some very specific reason why his defense reaction would be super important. But I can't think of a single thing that Oldheim does that Starvo just can't do better, and with a even wider card pool. So I don't know.
I, I do think Oldheim's slightly better at fatigue chain, just because if your game plan going into it's to fatigue a chain, then Oldheim's just
Is
like
it?
the defense reaction is relevant.
But that's
Yeah,
assuming
ice
you're
reacting.
fatiguing through blocking. But if you're fatiguing through
Mhm.
damage or forcing your opponent to block or interactions and attacks, Sarvo is the way to go. And that's usually at least up until this point in Flesh and Blood, it's the more tried and true method of fatiguing. I guess it's different with Chain, but still.
Yeah, there's been a lot of success against chain just by like blocking and fatiguing by blocking, because like the hero has the tools generally to beat that, but it's really hard to implement. Is that the right word?
Yeah. I'm,
An,
I'm just
an act? I don't know.
dubious that Oldheim Earth reacting or Ice reacting for 1 extra card or 2 damage is going to be the difference between make or break in that matchup, but who knows?
Yeah, I think the biggest reason is if you're fatiguing by blocking, it's easier to include 3 copies of Blizzard in your Oldhim deck where like their floor is ice reacting.
Yeah. That's fair. And to be fair, Chain still has Carrion Husk floating around, so on the turn that he needs to just block out a big dumb Starbow attack, he can do that pretty happily anyways, so.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Carrion Husk.
Yeah. It's a good card. Good card.
But I guess we talked about why would you ever play Oldhim over Starbow? Why would you ever play Briar over Chain?
So depending on which version of Briar we get in Living Legend, I assume it's the eroded version where you don't get to stack multiple embodiments, because that would be really weird if it went back to the old version of Briar.
Especially if they
But
printed the
even with
new text on cards and stuff, right?
yeah, so Prism does. I think Prism probably has a better matchup into Chain than she does into Briar, where she can kind of threaten to fatigue the Chain, and she has like not really a great plan against Briar, just kind of like get got a little bit. Um, and then Briar with access to Ball Lightning, we'll go back to seeing the Lightning Briars that we saw, where like those decks were like doing reasonably into Chain. I guess they'll only get 1 embodiment, which makes it worse. But
oh no, now I'm realizing
yeah, Ball Lightning,
we'll
Ball
have
Lightning,
all
and Plunder
the
Run.
horrible Ball Lightning interactions, because I still don't even remember the interaction with Ball Lightning and Spectral Shield. It's
The active player chooses.
yeah, okay, so it still goes over the one through the spectral
Yep.
shield.
Yep. So if you ball lightning for with a blue ball lightning and Prism has one spectral shield in it, if the Prism plate says no blocks, then the ball lightning player assigns the replacement effects first, and they choose that the ball lightning will deal one extra damage, and then the spectral shield absorbs one, and then Prism takes one.
Yeah. But I guess that's another point against Oldheim, though, because then if Briar gets sting, sting, ball, ball, ball back, I mean, like, Oldheim can never beat that. So even more of a reason why he's just unplayable, I guess.
Uh huh. Uh huh.
One day I'll let that meme die, but that day is not today.
Today is not the day. Yeah,
It's a good meme.
it's it's crazy how fast Oldheim Living Legend after losing his hammer. I thought it was going to be so bad.
Yeah, well, yeah. It turns out he was better than D tier. Who knew?
Who knew?
Yeah, it turns out him just being strictly better Bravo is still a completely fine place for him to be in the meta.
He doesn't get crippling crush though.
He gets endless winner. He gets more blue 3-block poppers, like 6 more.
Yeah, which matters a lot now.
Mm-hmm. Is it 6 more or is it just 3 more? I know it's mulch. Oh, yeah. And then
Mulch and
glacial.
glacial footsteps.
Yeah. So 6 more.
Yeah.
Those matter a lot, especially in the Dromai. That's why
Mm-hmm.
I think as Bravo, I kind of struggled into the Dromai matchup. And I was just like, oh, I get 6 more poppers at Oldheim. I guess I'm in. Like, sure.
Yeah. It also just makes your Zealous and Rouse more consistent. If you're trying to play an Anathos version of Oldheim, your Zealous and Rouses are like really important. And having more big blue attacks is real good for Zealous and Rouse.
Yeah. And I don't think we'll ever see a helmet as good as Crown of Seeds, but Bravo also just needs other things to spend resources on consistently. We've talked about this quite a bit, where if you're just pitching a card to Rampart, it's not really very card efficient, and putting in lots of cards that are like Peace of Minds or Staunch Responses and stuff like that, it's not super efficient in and of itself as well, because if your opponent's not attacking you and you're not able to use those defensive resources efficiently, then your hand kind of falls apart pretty quickly, and then you're not maximizing your hand's value, which gives your opponent time to catch up. It just turns into this whole thing. So you just need more consistent ways through equipment to spend resources to make it efficient. And Bravo obviously doesn't have it at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Poor Bravo.
Or Stalagmite. He gets Steelblade Buckler, though. I almost registered that card. I did register that card at a Realm event.
Yeah, it's crazy how playable Steelblade Buckler is, and like Stalagmite's so much better.
Yeah, it turns out just having 3 extra life
What a
or
card.
3 extra block on equipment is real good.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good thing Grasp of the Arcanite blocks for 3.
So,
you know.
Yep. Part of why the Rune Blades are so good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's like honestly a big part of why we've seen 2 Rune Blades Living Legend. We haven't seen any other aggro decks. Is like just having equipment that blocks really well. Like Grasp of the Arcanite for a while, they had Blood Chief Skeleton.
Yeah, if Skeleton was still legal, I mean, we would have all 3. We would have no Rune Blades legal in Classic Construct at this point in time if Skeleton was still around. Like, there just wouldn't be a Rune Blade class in Classic Construct at this point.
We're getting a new one in a month or 2.
True. Yeah, I'm saying right this second though. Like if they had never banned Skeleton, Viscerai would have lived a Living Legend long time ago.
Yeah. So I guess that also is another small reason to play Briar in Living Legend is you get Skeleton. So you have 3 block on your chest piece now, whereas like you don't have to play Tunic or Ironweave.
Yeah, I was thinking then if you also just wanted into Chain specifically, if you wanted to, you could just play Vexing Quill Hand plus Skeleton, because that's just a very powerful like 2 piece of equipment interaction. You get the 2 damage from the Rune Chance plus 4 total resources. But if you're a Redline Briar, I don't know if you'll need the reduction as much, because if all of your cards cost 0, who cares if they cost 2 less? But I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I think even ignoring the resource part of the curve or part of the card, it's just like there are spots where like it's better than Iron Wave and better than Tunic in a decent amount of matchups.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just you want to be able to block these on hits, and especially with Plunder Run existing in the format, you're going to be needing some block on your equipment.
But how are these decks? None of these decks can ever deal more. Drone of Brutality is going to be legal in the format, Michael. They're just going to get fatigued out. It's going to be Oldhim with Drone of Brutality. It's going to be broken. I forgot. None of these decks could ever hope to win because of Drone of Brutality. Oldhim just gets to block for 2 endlessly. How can they win?
So I think Drone of Brutality actually weirdly is a better tool against fatigue than it is in fatigue, because like spending 0 cards to attack for 6 is a pretty good way to beat fatigue. We see like Sledge be really relevant in the Oldhim mirrors where they're just like sledging each other because the games go to fatigue. Well, like if every hero gets to play 2 copies or 3 copies of Red Drone of Brutality, probably just 2 copies, you don't really need a third, then like you just have your own Sledge. You just 2 card 6 them. Like you can't, it's worse with Tunic, but when you're a deck that like is a functional aggressive deck before that point of the game, and then at that point of the game, you can loop your Drone of Brutalities. It's kind of like the Evergreen loop, I guess.
Right? It's a 2 for 6 that blocks 2.
2 resources to attack for 6.
I could see playing 1 red, 1 yellow. This way you can block with like a yellow if you needed to, shuffle, put it back into the bottom, and then like you could still use it as a resource card as well. I don't know.
Yeah, I would be inclined that you'd play 1 red, or to think you'd play 1 red, maybe multiple copies of it. But
yeah, I guess
I would think the red would be better, but I don't know, because I don't know. Yellow cards kind of suck.
We got it. We got to figure this out, man. We got to figure out our Drone of Brutality Oldhim deck.
No, we're not playing Drone in Oldhim.
Yeah,
if you're trying to beat
if
hard
you play Drone of
Oldhim,
Brutality in Oldhim, you also fix your worst matchup in Prism because you just have more poppers. You know, that was what made the matchup so bad. Oldhim didn't have enough poppers for the Heralds, right?
No, it was not.
What was the problem then?
Luminaris.
Luminaris.
Well, I guess even Iris Prism people say was really good into Oldhim. So it's just like,
yeah, it's just the auras.
The fact that every blue converts, just auras that you can't kill, and a weapon that makes auras quite good at killing your opponent.
Yeah. I guess that on that note, where do you see Prism fitting in this whole crazy world? Because people are going to play her regardless if she's good or not. You know, Pheno Black's going to register Prism at every Living Legend tournament from now until the rest of time.
Yeah, so I think right now Prism certainly makes it even worse to pick Oldhim if you were thinking about registering Oldhim. And then her matchup into Starvo is generally considered to be at least slightly Prism favored. Even if he gets Awakening back, it's still like Arclight Sentinel is very good. The auras are very good. Starvo doesn't struggle as much as Oldhim does against these auras, but like they're still very good against him. So I think she does a good job at making sure the format isn't like all Starvo. And I think she has a real shot at fatiguing Chain, and will make if you want to win a tournament as Chain in Living Legend format, you'll have to get a lot of practice into Fatigue Prism, because that matchup's like difficult to pilot.
Yeah, I guess. That being said, when Starbro was at its peak, Chain on Pablo Pintor, or Pablo Pintor on Chain, won the Pro Tour. So, I mean, like, between you and me, nobody else listening, I think Chain's just, like, the best deck by a huge margin. Because, like, I don't know, it's just, like...
A huge margin.
Have you ever read his hero ability? Have you seen what Chain's hero ability does? It's very good.
At that Pro Tour, Autumn's Touch and Awakening were both banned. So I think Starvo was a little handicapped, and
I forgot about the Autumn's Touch ban.
I guess Chain didn't have Seeds or Plunder Run either, but it's a lot easier to threaten to fatigue Chain when you have Autumn's Touch, because you play 9 copies of the card, probably at least 6, probably 9. So
I don't know, man. He's just a broken hero. I don't know what else to tell you. I just say the story all the time. Like, we learned how to play in Monarch. We looked at the 3 heroes in Chain, and we both were like, that Chain's a broken hero. We knew nothing else about the game other than Chain was just broken. Like, it was just very apparent from day zero.
I gave him Rosetta Thorn, so...
And that's not to talk
Yeah,
about
that was
any of
fun.
the new tools that he could have picked up from any of these new sets as well. Like maybe Chain starts playing that new the blue 3 block that makes it so defense reactions can't be played or something like that. Like there's these other
Defense reactions that have the name of another thing in the
mhm, yeah,
discard.
like
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a blue 3 block. There are worse cards for him to play. He gets little minnowism back, so does Briar. So
I keep forgetting that card's
yeah,
banned. That's
it
so
is.
weird.
But yeah, I think between Plunder Run and all the cavalcade of seeds, it's just like Chain's going to be the best deck by a mile. And on that note, do you think any card should be banned? And how should they balance the Living Legend format if something does become too problematic?
So that's a tricky one because I think like part of the appeal to having this like eternal format is that you can play with all of your cards except like things like Go Bananas. Like, and I guess specializations of heroes that haven't Living Legended, but for the most part, you can play with any card, especially the cards that you might not be able to play in Class Constructed. And I think ideally that would stay consistent. It's just like what happens if the metagame does get really stagnant, where like I guess like the limited hero pool already is going to lead to being kind of stagnant. But if Chain is the best deck by miles and no one can beat him, then like what happens? Eventually, Icelander will Living Legend and she has a good Chain matchup, right?
Yeah, we've
At least
no.
reasonable.
It's reasonable. I'm sure a world champion caliber Icelander maybe could have done better into the Chain matchup than I did. But yeah, I had that Chain v Icelander because we were just shit talking like Indianapolis calling, and Pete was sitting there after he was on a podcast, and he was like, "Yeah, I think Chain's just the most broken hero, and he's going to dominate Living Legend for him." And I was like, "No, once Icelander gets there, Icelander could totally beat up Chain." And then we made that charity bet, and then Chain has a lot more tools through disruption in Icelander and hypothermia than I gave him credit for. So, lesson learned. And from that day forward, I was just like,
Yeah.
"Yes, I don't. Chain is broken, 100%, no questions asked."
I I still think Icelander is pretty solid in the Chain, but I think it might be a while before we see her getting out of Class Constructed. I think I don't know.
Well,
Might,
you're
we
just not
might
going to
have
play
her
her in
for a
any
little
more
while.
tournaments. Basically, that's your plan to keep her around.
I mean, Prism's coming back. It's like at a
Mm,
100-0 matchup. You thought Oldheimer's Prism was bad. Have you played Icelander into Prism?
yeah, all this ward stuff floating around is boding not great for Wizards. I wonder if they'll print like an effect because there's that new card. They're printing more cards that are like damage can't be prevented if under X conditions or something like that, or the new warrior attack reactions where damage can't be prevented. I wonder if they'll ever. No, it would be too good, like an arcane spell or something like that. Even if it costs like 3 or something like that, arcane damage can't be prevented this turn. It'd probably be too good because then even Null Rune wouldn't work anymore, right? Null Rune, Spell Void, all that stuff just would be useless that turn. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think what they could do, I think if they want to explore that space, they could have something like a gloves that basically you pay a resource and the first time a damage would be prevented this turn, it's not prevented, but you have to do it like proactively instead of attack reaction. Something
Like
similar to Vanguard or Vambrace,
anti Null
but for
Rune,
arcane damage. I think that would be reasonable. Yeah, yeah. So like you'd have to
Rune
commit to
Rune.
it beforehand. You'd have to commit to it beforehand, but like if the gloves are reusable, that leaves them in an interesting spot where like they're worse than Nodes Pump in a lot of spots because if your opponent's not arcane barriering, you'd rather just have +1 damage than spend a resource for round one. But if your opponent's not arcane barriering, uh so they're worse than nodes in that spot. But if your opponent is arcane barriering, the fact that they're reusable does make it kind of interesting. I could see that leading to like kind of problematic play patterns, but it is something they could explore.
I don't know how that would work in the context of the rules. Just thinking about it, because the damage thing makes sense because there has to be a prevention effect happening before damage resolution, but no rune happens
Mhm.
on the resolution of the arcane damage. So, like, how do you say, while the damage is resolving, I'm negating your negation of the resolving?
Well,
Or you just
well,
say
Crown of Seeds during
proactively?
damage resolution. Yeah, you have to use it proactively. So it'd be like an action with go again rather than an instant.
Okay.
Is what my idea, or an instant that doesn't, or an instant like you still have to use it during the instant speed window, whether it's an instant or an action with go again. Probably would be an instant because the action's kind of weird because if it's an action, then you can't use it on your opponent's turn. That's kind of Wizard's whole thing. But
Yeah.
I could see it being an action still. I guess like that's actually an interesting way to balance it too, is if it's an action, because if you're trying to deal damage on your opponent on their turn, they already have less counterplay because they have to spend their cards, and then you just get to choose to do your thing. So I don't know. Card design, interesting spots, but
Yeah.
we'll see. We're not getting any wizard cards this set.
Yeah, we are.
Or I guess we are. We aren't getting a new
Kano and Icelander
specialization. We could. Never mind.
Probably, more than likely.
Hopefully
Assuming that every hero is going to get a specialization,
an attack that you can cast from your arsenal. So you can codex back some attack that is actually that exists, blue ice card.
That exists. It's called Down and Dirty.
No. That's a bad one though. It blocks for 2. I don't want 2 points of value off the codex. I need to give him a frostbite and deal some damage and activate my waning moon after they codex me.
I wonder if they'll ever come out with modal cards. Like they
do. We have Art of War. We have Enlightened Strike.
No, I mean like cards that are attacks and non-attack actions, like split cards. Like in Magic the Gathering, there were the ones that were like instants and sorceries, or like they had two. They were like 2 different cards on one card. That would be interesting. But then I guess those cards also became more and more problematic as the game went on as well. But it's something interesting to think about.
Yeah, having 2 different card types on your same card makes things kind of a pain for like understanding what cards interact with them. If a card interacts with an instant in your discard pile and you have this attack action / instant card, does it interact with it? That's like something that like led to some really weird rulings in Magic. I'm thinking of Torrential Gearhulk plus Commit Memory is the one that comes to mind. But
the one deck I ever top aided
for our non Magic audience, I think if they do, I guess also for any audience, if they do look at doing something like that where they're like combining cards to have multiple effects, I would more expect it to see like an alternate cost with an alternate effect without actually changing the card type.
So like
here's your 2 block attack action, but you can pay
the Oko set.
Adventures?
Yeah, no, not Adventures from. There's a storybook one. It was right after Modern Horizons 2, right before the pandemic.
Yeah, it was Adventures. Because you cast your creature as a spell.
Oh, the mechanic was called Adventure. Okay. I was like, the set's not called Adventures, Michael. But yeah, the mechanic is called Adventure. So like the adventure mechanic. Okay, thank you.
I was thinking more like, if we're still using the Magic comparisons, like there's some creature cards that like are like a creature and they do certain things when you play them, but you can also pay X resources and discard them for some effect from your hand. And I'm thinking like,
or from your graveyard sometimes.
We'd have like yeah, sure. So we'd have like an attack action that's like some card that does something, and then you could pay 2 resources and discard it, and your next attack action this turn gets +4 or something.
Yeah, because we have the whole Blood Debt and a lot of cards that you can play or like reuse from the Banish Zone, but up until Codex, we've seen them be extremely cautious with effects that interact with like getting cards from graveyards and stuff like that. So, but I guess if I had to guess, somebody who is working there, if they don't like Remembrance because that leads to bad gameplay loops, which is shuffling cards back in, it's probably better to have cards that do something from your graveyard as opposed to putting the cards from your graveyard back in your deck, right?
Yeah, something like Spew Shadows, but using cards in your discard instead of your Banish Zone makes sense to me. Something where like you just get to play a card from your discard. I guess Codex of Frailty kind of does that.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about, but yeah.
That's interesting. There's so much design space in this game. It's crazy. I just think about it sometimes. I'm just like, I wonder what they're going to come up with. Like it's kind of exciting.
Yeah, they built like a really good like foundation for a game where like there's like so many different things they can do with like cards, and like doing things.
Yeah, and like
I
there's the
think it's just
whole other
a good game.
number in the bottom of every hero's tech box of intellect, and it's like there's so many different ways you can balance that, and we've seen them try, and I think Data Doll's the only one, right?
I think so. I think Data Doll's the only 3 intellect hero.
Yeah, so like what would it take to make like a 4 intellect hero? Like what would have to be like their
Everyone's a 4
downside or
intellect
something like,
hero.
or 5 intellect hero? I mean,
Uh, It'd have to be pretty bad.
what would you do? Start
Drawing
at
a whole
30?
extra card every turn. That's not enough. Because if each card's worth 3 points of value on average, then you're just getting +3 every turn. So the game has to go 3.13 turns before you've broken even.
That's fair. I don't know.
I think starting at 10 might be okay.
No way. 10's too low. I could give you 20 as an adult hero and then 10 as a blitz hero, but I don't know.
I think if you have 20 health as an adult hero, assuming you get class cards, if you're just only playing generics, that might be good enough because generic cards kind of suck. The pool's kind of small. Like it's hard to build a deck of 60 good generic cards and good generic equipment.
What about you can't have
them
generic cards, or you can only have like draconic wizard cards in your deck or something like that, or like you can only have this very specific combination of cards in your actual deck.
So if you could only have draconic wizard cards in your deck, that hero would be atrocious, even if they had 100. Yeah. I think like something like the Emperor, where they like highly limit deck building options. You can only put reds in your deck with the Emperor.
Yeah, the Emperor should have 5 intellect. That's a good point.
I think the fact that he has 4 intellect and he gets access to warrior and wizard cards and only gets to play red cards, I think like he's not great, but I think if he had 5 intellect, he'd be broken at 15 health with his card pool.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's interesting.
I would play any game against any blitz hero if I get 5 intellect and 15 health as the Emperor.
You think 5 intellect's just that good?
Yeah. Yeah. Because like, so not only do you get an additional card of value every turn, you also just have more possible ways to use your hand efficiently each turn. Where like, if you look at a hero like Briar, for example, where like you're like trying to set up Channel Mount Heroic plus like these 0 cost go against, and you're blocking with extra non-attack actions, just like drawing an extra card makes it much more likely you'll keep your things around. Keeping like a Channel like Frigid in play seems much more likely when you have a full extra card each turn. So like,
what about
you're getting this like you're getting linear power, and you're also getting the combination of cards that are powerful together are going to come together more often.
Here's a cute card, hero text box that I want to get your opinion on. This hero starts with 0 action points at the start of their turn. Once per turn instant, pay some number of resources, gain 1 action point.
Once per turn instant?
Yeah, so you can only gain 1. You can gain your first action point per turn, but you have to pay resources for it. But you have 5 intellect.
So, assuming this costs 2 resources, because I think at 3 you're basically a 4 intellect hero that has to draw blue every turn or you're losing. I guess you do unlock the combination aspect of the class. You're more likely to draw your combination of powerful cards.
And you can
at 2 cost
defense reactions or more defensive cards a little bit easier.
Oh gosh, now this hero just sounds like a complete fatigue hero, because how are you ever leaking damage through the hero with 5 cards? Oh no.
I mean,
you have to give him no weapon or something. You can't have a whale or a Titan's Fist or Drone Brutality.
There's ways to balance.
Because Drone Brutality would actually be good in this.
Because that was the other lever I was pulling in my mind then, is pulling the action point lever, putting that down.
Mm-hmm.
And then conversely, like let's say you were a 3 intellect hero, do you think you could have 2 base 2 action points per turn?
Oh, easily. Yeah, that would be bad. That would still be bad. Having a second action point's not worth giving up a full card. That's like everyone can play Lead the Charge red if they really want one more action point for 1 less card. And it even has upside. Sometimes you can block for 2 and you don't need the action point. Mm-hmm. I think like to have enough action points to make up for having less intellect, I think with unlimited action points, a 3 intellect hero would probably still be below average if they have normal health, normal card pool.
What about like a specialization weapon that's like super above rate?
Yeah, that would help. If you have a weapon that just if you
like
have
a
a rock
rock
with
that
no
doesn't have the
restrictions
condition.
where you just pitch
Yeah,
a
yeah.
blue.
I
The
like that we both went there.
yeah, that might be enough to make up for it. That would make the hero couldn't really fatigue because they only have 3 cards to play defense with. They have a broken weapon, so they're trying to figure out how to end the game as quickly as possible because they're just like down a card every turn. But they actually don't care about ending the game as quickly as possible if their weapon's above rate. It would be really weird. I don't know how you would build a hero like that. That's like
Sounds like I hit upon
I don't
a
know.
really good design of a hero. You're welcome. You're welcome, LSS.
Uh-huh.
Look at that.
Uh-huh. I guess like the play patterns become kind of bad. I think because your deck becomes all defense reactions and cards that you can pitch to swing your weapon.
I
Because
don't think that's true.
the only other
I think,
cards you would play is things that have go again. Because if you're
yeah,
any turn you're
like
not
Scarfer
swinging your
Scar.
weapon, sure. So anytime you're not swinging your weapon, you're just like spewing. So you'd want just good defensive cards and ways to swing your weapon. And then the fact that you have a giant weapon, you can fatigue every or threaten to fatigue everybody. And you
And there
want
aren't that many
ideally
good
to
defensive like options if you're only getting 2 cards per turn. Because if you look at like Peace of Mind, Oasis Respite, you don't want those because you don't want cards that cost resources. So you really just have Sink Belows and Fate for Scenes. That's it.
yeah, you get Sinks, Fates, that all you got, probably 9 Finals. I think Scar would make the deck. And then whatever your class cards are, surely there's some good class cards going on. I don't know what class this is, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Kind of weird a little bit.
Yeah, let's talk about one last thing of design space because it's relevant. How do you feel about the new Unity stuff that's been going around? The rewarding blocking kind of or blocking matters kind of type effects on cards.
Yeah, so I do like the idea of having cards that are better at blocking than just generic 3 blocks, but worse at blocking than like the 4 block defense reactions. So like I think Unity is in a nice spot where it's like a 3 block with Unity that gets some bonus if you block with 2 cards is better than a 3 block, but it's worse than a 4 block. And I think that's good. I think I like the idea of cards that are again in that range. I'm not sure I'm sold on the specific implementation because the fact that you have to block with 2 cards at the same time means these cards are textless against heroes that you're not blocking with 2 cards. For example, like if you're playing at Sakatsu, there's
I mean, they
very
still
few
like
times
you
that
can
you
still
want to block
cast
with
these
2
cards.
cards.
They have powerful effects.
Sure. Their defense abilities are polarized against heroes that are attacking with big things that don't have dominate. So like against Oldheim or who else plays big attacks? Reinar. These cards are quite good where you're just like throwing 2 cards in front of their big thing. Dorinthia even. You just throw your 2 cards in front of their thing, you get your Unity trigger. Whereas against the decks that are like going wide, like the Rune Blades and the Ninjas, these cards are not getting that extra defensive value. And I think that might just be intended, but it feels weird to me that the decks that you
Yeah,
want to block more often against, they're worse against than the decks that are just playing like big attacks when you give them extra cards.
yeah, because you're never triggering like Unity against Phi. Like that's just not a thing you would ever do. So
Yeah,
I
you
get where you're
might double
coming from
block a
there.
snatch at the end, but
And at that point, like most of these are +1 or +0.5 or something like that on the double block. So you're still spewing 2 to 2.5 value on that double block anyways. I don't know.
yeah,
I don't know. It's an interesting concept.
I do really like the design space of cards that are better than 3 blocks in defense, but worse than like Sync Blow and Fate for Scene. I think that's really cool. I think that Unity is kind of the first time we've seen them do something like that, and I'm excited to see what they do with this kind of space.
I wonder if we'll ever see like Rune Blade cards that are like if you block with an attack and a non-attack action, do a thing. That's kind of an interesting way to take defensive Rune Blades, right?
Yeah, like a non-attack action that says if you blocked with an attack action this turn, do a thing, or even equipment that's like if you do both of these, you can get
It
some
gets
bonus.
+2 defense until end of turn or something like that.
I don't know. I don't know what it should do, but yeah,
It should just have maybe like
definitely space.
base 0 power, like or base 0 block. If you've blocked with an attack and a non-attack action card this turn, it gets +2 block until end of turn.
Yeah, that sounds really strong. It could be something like if you block with an attack and a non-attack action, create like some kind of token like similar to Briar's embodiments.
I don't think
if the armor gets to block for 2 over and over again.
Assuming that your opponent's going wide, that you get to block a second attack every turn.
Well, you can just throw the armor in front of something while it blocks for 0, and it'll still get the trigger.
Uh,
I don't know. It's interesting. I could see it being 1 and still being like quite good. So
that's fair.
I don't know. There's a lot of room to make cards. We're just spitballing some random card ideas.
Okay. Any final thoughts about Living Legend format, card design, anything else in Evo? Any final thoughts before we wrap things up then?
Evo. No, I think I'm good. Flash and Blood's a really cool game. There's a lot of design space. I think I don't know. We just talked about card design for a while. We just like scratched like a couple different things they could do, and there's like a million different things they can do with the game, and that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that being said, the next time you're designing your own custom Flesh and Blood cards, always remember, mind your manners. Thanks for watching.